Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Reaction Show. My name is Andrew Velez. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Joel Dehls. We are here after Monday Night Football. One pretty good game, one miserable game. We're talking about Tennessee versus Miami, but more importantly, the Lions versus Seattle. We watched Detroit beat Seattle. We watched Tennessee dominate the Miami Dolphins. Before we get into any football, Mr. Dehls, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great, man. We got some great football, not footballs. Mike sounds terrible again.
Unfortunately, yes, it does. There's not much you
You
can
go
do.
ahead, I'll reset.
And to the fans that are watching, cut Dell some slack. He's trying as hard as he can to get his mic in order. That also being said, tonight is going to be a little bit quicker of an episode. Dell's does have work in the morning, so we're going to cater to him today. That being said, awesome night of football if you are a Detroit Lions fan. Not a awesome night if you're a Miami Dolphins fan. Let's talk about that game first and then get into the more interesting one. The Titans do beat Miami 31-12. Without Tua Tagovailoa, the truth of the matter is this is not a team worth watching. I watched the Tennessee Titans essentially do whatever they wanted against the Miami Dolphins on the defensive side of the ball because they simply couldn't move it. I watched HN, who did have an ankle injury in this game, did end up coming back, 10 carries, 15 yards, 3 carries, 3 targets, 14 yards. But outside of that, Tyler Huntley did have a garbage time rushing touchdown. That was cool. Will Levis goes out in this game. We saw Mason Rudolph come in, was able to put them in decent field possession for Nick Folk to go and kick 70 field goals for what it seemed like. But Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears really set the tone for this game. Tajay not efficient, 15 carries, 39 yards, but did get into the end zone. Tony Pollard, my start of the week, had himself an awesome ball game. 22 carries, 88 yards. They were trying their hardest to get him that touchdown, and they got in that last second drive. He goes and scores a touchdown, 2 catches, 2 targets, 20 yards. But the Miami Dolphins, it's simple. Without Tua Tagovailoa, there's nothing I want to do with Miami. I don't want to watch them. I don't want any of their players on my team in fantasy football. That includes Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, nothing. I want nothing to do with this team. Mike McDaniel, without Tua Tagovailoa, understandable that you have Skylar Thompson, Tim Boyle, and now Tyler Snoop Huntley. There's no real quarterback weapon. But damn, you are missing Tua Tagovailoa, and the failure that you've had as adjusting the offense without Tua Tagovailoa also is extremely alarming. But again, let's wrap up the Miami conversation because, again, this is not a team worth talking about right now. Let's talk about the real highlight, Seattle versus Detroit. We watched Detroit win this game at home, 42-29. A lot of offense, minimal defense. A lot of that was catered because we did see Seattle have a significant amount of injuries coming into this game. We were wondering how Detroit's offense would look against a really respectable unit in Seattle, regardless of the injuries that they had. Jared Goff has a perfect night. 18 for 18, has more receptions than he has incompletions today. One of those receptions, the only reception, goes for a touchdown that was thrown to him by Amon-Ra St. Brown, who also got into the end zone in his own right. But Jared Goff, 292. A lot of that was 80 or 70 yards to Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams only having 2 catches, but being efficient, getting into the end zone with that touchdown. We see Amon-Ra, like I mentioned, 6 catches, 6 targets, 45 yards and a touchdown. But the real dominant part for their game was the rushing attack of David Montgomery, whether it was him doing in the pass, of course, but also Jahmyr Gibbs, 14 carries, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Monty, 12 carries, 40 yards, but had that one big play where he goes for 40 yards and just absolutely lays the boom on Devon Witherspoon. This was the Detroit Lions' best performance by far offensively, regardless of whether it was against a Seattle banged-up defense. You have to go out there and execute against a team that was answering almost every single punch that you threw at them. And Jared Goff and company were able to rise to the occasion and were able to go ahead and pull out this win.
Do I sound better or worse or the same?
You sound better, a little loud, but honestly, I'll deal with it.
A little loud. Let's turn
That's
her
okay.
down, maybe just a touch. I could always just switch to my AirPod mics if it sounds terrible.
Sound good,
That being
brother.
said, this was an interesting game because it felt like Detroit was just getting chunk play after chunk play. That Amon-Ra only gets 6 targets. He only sees 6 receptions for 45 yards. JMO gets that big 1 reception for 70 yards and a touchdown. And they were able to just do really whatever they want against Seattle. They were able to run the ball with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. They were able to pass the ball. As you mentioned, Jared Goff perfect on the night, 18 for 18. And on the other side, Geno Smith had a career night, 395 passing yards, passing touchdown. DK Metcalf continues his season over 100 yards. We see JSN have another solid game, 8 receptions, only for 50 yards, but those PPR leagues did great. Tyler Lockett, all big three of these receivers really got involved in this offense. It's a shame that the Lions are going on their bye next week because this was like the first time we saw this offense look like what it's basically looked like for the last 2 seasons, right? A team that could run the ball whenever it wants. Then off of play action, you have Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams getting these cross runs. We saw Sam Laporta finally get involved some as well. 4 catches for 53 yards, nearly had a touchdown. Amon-Ra also almost had 3 total touchdowns in this game. He went down at the 1-yard line. But overall, it was extremely encouraging to see this Lions offense get back on track, right? Because this was an offense that we were, I wouldn't say worried about, but Jared Goff was one of my favorite players this year. He was like QB 29 entering this week. Even Gibbs and Montgomery both were doing solid, but Gibbs is probably a bit disappointing from where you were drafting him. Amon-Ra St. Brown only has 6 receptions, 45 yards in this game, but it felt like this offense finally got back to life. You score 40 points, you're at home in the Dome, and you're flying all over the field. So I thought overall the vibe from this game, this Detroit team, feels like this is the team we were expecting entering the year. And after the bye, I believe they play Indy week the following week. I could double check that. But you should feel very confident that this offense can get back on track and continue what they showed against Seattle.
And also talking about Seattle, because I spoke a lot about Detroit, I think they're matchup proof at this point, unless you're going up against maybe the highest caliber defense, the ones that come to mind. Obviously, the Pittsburgh Steelers, my Denver Broncos, they already faced them and they were able to handle business. DK Metcalf, this is a guy that we're potentially talking about lock top 10 receiver fantasy football rest of the season. 104 yards, had an unfortunate fumble after really carrying defenders with him down the field. 7 catches, 12 targets. He was dominant, and defenders, Carlton Davis, Terrion Arnold, they could not guard him. No matter who they put on him, he's a mismatch against any corner right now, aside from, of course, my GOAT, Pat Surtain. But this was an awesome performance, also showing from the Seattle offense. Ken Walker, I should have just kept my sit of the week to Zach Charbonnet. Ken Walker's matchup proof also. When he's on the football field, is an elite running back. He's one of the best, most efficient running backs in football against the best defensive front to stop the run. 12 carries, 80 yards, uber efficient, 3 touchdowns, 4 catches, 36 yards. He could do whatever he wanted tonight. It did not matter. He was the heart and soul of this team, but Geno Smith continues to impress. He goes and although he's unfortunately not able to get the win, career highs in completions, pass attempts, passing yards, was only able to get into the end zone once, but he had 2 plays, one to Decaf and one to Bobo, if I'm not mistaken, or if it wasn't Bobo, it was Barner, where he was just short at the 1-yard line. So he could have had 2 other passing touchdowns that ended up going to Ken Walker. He had himself an awesome ball game, but the story of this one for me, like you mentioned, has to be Detroit's offense. They were clicking on all cylinders. A perfect night for the Detroit offense. And you mentioned the bye next week. That's a bummer, but you can't help but feel optimistic about them moving forward. And similarly with Seattle, the defense was banged up. Of course, they didn't have a great showing on a defensive end, but their offense made up. And they really proved to me that moving forward, you respect them as one of the cream of the crop offenses.
Yeah, they don't play Indy after the bye. They play Dallas after the bye, whose defense has been more or less Swiss cheese for a majority of this season. So that game's in Dallas. It's going to be a crazy high over/under. So that's going to be a fun game once they return in week 6.
And Dehls, we're going to get into super chats, but may I suggest maybe switching over to the Apple AirPods? It would just make your life a little bit easier. Screw the mic. I agree. Shout out to the Tailgate Sports Podcast. The GOATs, we appreciate that. You're the GOAT. Should I shout Josh Jacobs? If so, what can I get? With Jordan Love back in this offense, you're not going to face Minnesota every single week. I think Josh Jacobs had to do a job as a blocker this past week. It seems as if that's really what he has to do sometimes to alleviate some pressure off Jordan. There's going to be better matchups for him. We saw that versus the Eagles, where the first half he's irrelevant. Second half he goes out there and balls. But if you really want to go and shop Josh Jacobs, maybe you look for an upgrade there. Not many options that are going to have the volume that Josh Jacobs has, although this obviously wasn't the week for him. I think that you still have to trust what the Packers offense can be.
Do I sound terrible right now with the AirPods?
not great, but it doesn't sound staticky. So it is what it is.
All right, we'll get this fixed for next episode. But I was going to talk about Josh Jacobs and my duds because I don't think he's a complete sell. I thought it was negative game script more than anything, right? I think this is a really bad game for him where you go down by 3 touchdowns early in this game. Emmanuel Wilson is getting more involved than I think we would like. He's played 40% of snaps these last 2 weeks, so that's something just to keep track of. But Josh Jacobs has still looked really good. Like, he's averaging nearly 6 yards a carry. He's still getting involved in this offense. And their upcoming schedule, they have the Rams, the Cardinals, the Texans, and the Jaguars for the next month. So, I mean, if you get an upgrade, like obviously you could go get James Cook, for example. Sure, do that trade. But I wouldn't be looking to trade Josh Jacobs for a perceived downgrade at the running back position.
Shout out to Kill Moves. He says, shout out to y'all. PSN is down, so I'm bored as hell. That's bad news for when I get off of this podcast. Shout out to Kenny. Walk him down. He dropped 34 for me. Blessed to have that brother back. Listen, like I mentioned, if he's starting, if he's healthy, that is one of the best plays you can have in fantasy football. He's shown when he is healthy and on the football field, he's one of the most dominant in the game. Shout out to him. I saw somebody made a TikTok post of pictures and a story. He was down 33 coming into the night. Ken Walker saved the day, and he was able to go and pull it out. It was a dominant performance from him, but even still, as awesome as that offense was, Detroit could do whatever they wanted on offense, so we saw them go out there and pull out this W. But Mr. Dehls, we're going to go rapid fire through this one. Let's go through our studs and duds of week 4. I'll start us off at the quarterback position. There was a lot of solid performances, but of course, we've had some repeat names here. Sam Darnold, quarterback 7 this week, 22 of 31, 71%, had an interception and a fumble. That didn't matter. Still got 22 fantasy points on the board. He's a must start every week. I don't care who he's going up against. Sam Darnold has shown in this offense, Kevin O'Connell can call a great enough game for him, and he's going to go out there and he's going to give you reliable output, 3 touchdowns also. He's a dog. Next guy, this is a guy we have to show love, quarterback 1, Justin Fields, 22 of 34, 65% completion percentage, 312 passing yards on the ground, 55 rushing, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 1 touchdown passing, 32 fantasy points, and he lost a fumble in this game. This was his best game in a long time. So you love to see this, especially in a game where Pittsburgh's defense did not come to play. He was one of the main catalysts of this team, and for them to fall short, but him to have this great fantasy performance, you got to love that if you were able to snag him. The last guy I want to shout out, Mr. Jordan Love, my guy coming into the season, first game back off of injury, quarterback 2, 32 of 54. Yuck. 59% completion percentage, 3 INTs. Yuck. But 389 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's what gets you paid in fantasy football. 31.2 fantasy points. He's here. And every single week, it does not matter. He's going to go out there and he's going to ball at the highest of levels. I love Jordan Love moving forward. No pun intended.
Nothing wrong with Jameis Winston, Blake Bortles in your weeks a couple times. You need that. You need a couple of those weeks. 2 quarterbacks I want to shout out. Baker Mayfield, quarterback 3 on the season as we stand today. 3 top 5 finishes through 4 weeks, 350 yards, 2 touchdowns against the Eagles. He has an elite connection with both these receivers, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I feel like over these last couple of seasons, it's been one guy but not the other. Usually been Mike Evans, but Chris Godwin has been sensational this year. And of course, you know what Mike Evans can do. And he's looking like Baker Mayfield's looking like one of the best streaming options at the quarterback position for this year. The other quarterback, Andy Dalton. His last 3 starts, right, going back to last year, the 1 game he started, and the 2 this year, QB7, QB8, QB10. He's averaging over 40 passing attempts per game, 300-plus passing yards in 2 of those 3 games, 2-plus passing touchdowns in all 3 of these games. And the Panthers can say, we want to start Bryce Young. Bryce Young's our quarterback. He's going to get another shot. Not with the way Andy Dalton looks like in this offense. We're going to talk about more Panthers. Damn, we're talking about Panthers at every position when we get to the wide receivers and the running backs here. But Dalton has been so sensational for real life and for fantasy football that if you're able to pick him up, especially in these 2 quarterback leagues where you're getting super deep, he's someone that has to be in your lineup every week.
Now let's move on to our quarterback duds. 1 quarterback not worried about, Josh Allen. Quarterback 25, 16 for 29, 180 yards, 55% completion percentage, lost a fumble as well. Ugly game entirely for the Buffalo Bills. And even still, he had an awesome play on the sideline that was almost a 50-yard touchdown to Khalil Shakir. Falls short at the goal line. They end up having a rushing touchdown to Ty Johnson. That was a bummer if you're a Josh Allen manager. But I'm not worried about this. He's going to be awesome. He's Josh Allen. You don't think twice about it. This quarterback, though, I'm starting to have some concerns because there's been back-to-back weeks where we've seen Kyler Murray, especially in this matchup versus the worst secondary in football, the Commanders. Quarterback 21, 16 for 22. Cute completion percentage, 142 yards. This is what's alarming to me, Mr. Dehls. 1 carry, 3 yards. That's not Kyler Murray. He simply didn't want him bad enough in this game. He looked like he was lacking aggression in this game. 10 fantasy points. The only touchdown that he had was to Marvin in that first quarter, first drive. Then they went stagnant rest of the game. An embarrassing performance, truthfully, against one of the worst teams in football on the secondary side of things, on the defensive side of things, because when we talk about that offense, the Commanders are legit. But Kyler Murray is better than what he's producing these last couple of weeks. I still think that he's a extremely valuable fantasy option. But against the worst secondary in football, this being the performance you put forth, that is not ideal and something I'm monitoring moving forward.
Yeah, this was a week you were expecting Kyler to be like quarterback one
best?
overall. When you're playing the Commanders, you should be a top 5 quarterback if you're anything kind of decent. 2 quarterback duds I'll point out. Derek Carr, back-to-back weeks where Derek Carr is on the duds list. He was terrible, at least for fantasy. For real life, probably a little bit better, but 28 for 35, so he's completing a bunch of passes, but only 239 yards, no touchdowns, threw an interception. We know how great this offense looked the first 2 weeks of the season, right? Derek Carr had 2 top 6 finishes. He was looking like a guy that's potentially the biggest steal in all of fantasy drafts with how great this offense was looking. But now you follow that up with 2 finishes outside of the top 24 quarterbacks. So guys that you're not even really starting, even in 2 quarterback leagues. He has Kansas City next week. I want nothing to do with that. And a couple weeks later, he's got Denver. Week after that, he's got the Chargers. We're talking about 3 out of these next 4 weeks. They're matchups you're really not interested in. Like, straight up, you do not want to start Derek Carr in those 1 quarterback leagues. If you did pick him up, I think he's droppable. Go pick up a Baker Mayfield. If somehow Sam Darnold's still out there, there's a lot of other better streaming players like Geno Smith, who we just saw. He's a streaming quarterback too. I think he kind of goes back into like the Derek Carr, what we thought he was going into the season, where maybe he gives you a couple of surprises, but you can't rely on him week to week. The other quarterback, Caleb Williams, he's just been terrible fantasy, right? Like, we've known his struggles as a real life quarterback, but even for fantasy football, he's been arguably even worse. He has 1 finish within the top 15 this season, 3 finishes as quarterback 20 or worse, more interceptions than touchdowns as we sit here a month into the season. He's got some great matchups coming up, right? He's got the Texans, the Colts, the Rams, but he's also gone up against he's gone against exploitable or bad defense, I should say. He's played the Texans, he's played the Colts, he's played the Rams. These are all defenses that have struggled this season to guard, opposing fantasy quarterbacks, and he hasn't delivered. So if he's not doing that against some of the worst defenses against fantasy quarterbacks in the NFL, it's hard to envision a world where this gets better as time goes on. Even though he's a rookie, it'll probably, the numbers will improve, but we don't see the rushing as much as we should. We're not seeing these big plays as consistently as we expected. And there just seems to be a lack of chemistry with these receivers, whether it's DJ Moore, whether it's Roma Dunze, Keenan Allen's first game back. So maybe we'll see that, get more involved as the season goes on. But right now, there's just something missing from this Bears offense that keeps me completely away from Caleb.
Now, moving on to our running back studs of the week, Derrick Henry. I know that we don't talk about the dogs often, but Derrick Henry going and showing that he's still one of the best in football, not just one of the best all time, but one of the best in the game still. 24 carries, 199 yards, 3 plays of 20 yards or more. We know one of those was the 80-yard bomb that he had to start the game, and he also had a receiving touchdown to throw on top of that. RB1, 36 fantasy points, 6 touchdowns already to start the season. We're in week 3. We are just finishing week 4. And I called 20 at the start of the season. Who knows what number he gets to? DeAndre Swift. I have a bone to pick with this man. 16 carries, 93 yards, 7 targets, 7 catches, 72 yards. An unbelievably great performance out of DeAndre Swift. No way around it. Your RB2 on the week. I can't believe that after week 3 going up against the Colts, he waits till going up against the Rams. And fair, solid matchup. Excellent in this game. You have to give him his flowers. And the last thing I want to shout out, Chase Brown, RB5, 15 attempts, 80 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. He had averaged 5.3 yards a carry, 23 fantasy points. And something to note, Zach Moss also got 15 carries. He only averaged 3.4 a touch, and he also did have a receiving touchdown. So very interesting, giving them both equal amount of opportunity, but understanding We saw that last week versus the Commanders. Chase Brown was the more efficient back. Again, in this matchup going against the Carolina Panthers, the more efficient back was once again Chase Brown, but we saw an uptick in touches.
Yeah, since he's been quietly like an elite rushing team, they're top 7 in rushing success rate. They just run the ball like a bottom 3 to 5 rate in the league, or at least entering this week. But to see them get 30 running back carries is pretty insane. Chase Brown is probably available on a ton of waiver wires. He's going to be one of the hottest names. 2 running backs I want to shout out: Mr. Chuba Hubbard, Carolina Panthers. I hope you kept talking to him for the first couple of weeks. I wouldn't have blamed you if you dropped him after that week 2, because Hubbard was one of those guys that in the late rounds, in the teens, someone that I was looking to target, because at the end of last season, he was like a pretty solid running back 2. We know they brought in Jonathan Brooks, but of course he was going to start the season on the IR, but he's been sensational since Dalton's taken over. We're talking back-to-back weeks as a top 6 running back, 18 carries, 100 yards, and a touchdown. Also had 4 catches through the air. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry last season. He's a must start going forward, right? Jonathan Brooks was eligible to come back this week to practice Wednesday, or his practice window was eligible to be open this week. We saw Nick Chubb. His window was open. I think he's expected to practice on Wednesday, so that's a good sign that he should be available within the next 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even as early as week 6 possibly. But Jonathan Brooks, on the other hand, his practice window did not open, right? He was eligible to come off this week, but he's going to be at least 1 more week away. With that being said, we're probably looking at like a week 6, week 7 return for Jonathan Brooks. And even once he does come back, it's going to take a couple weeks to get him implemented in this backfield. So you probably have another month, and that might even be on the conservative side of Hubbard being kind of a must-start running back in fantasy. The other running back I want to shout out, Jordan Mason, not because of Jordan Mason, but because of the news we got from CMC. Achilles tendonitis in both of his legs. Not a great sign. Not something that I don't think we were really expecting. And as this goes on and he goes to Germany and more news comes out, and everything's just been negative with CMC right now. Like they had that one report that he's gonna vamp up, or what, I don't know what they said. They're gonna use him more in practice this upcoming week. So I guess that's a good sign. But to me, this is the outcome right now is like CMC doesn't play football at all this season, right? That's a real possibility. I still think the more realistic possibility is he plays in the playoffs, but as this regular season winds down, this is a backfield that Jordan Mason's going to own at minimum 50% of. And there's a real possibility it's closer to 60 or 70% as you preserve him, because you want CMC in that divisional round, that conference championship, and potentially the Super Bowl if they're able to get back there. But it's Jordan Mason's looking like a James Conner-esque pickup that we saw a few seasons ago when Le'Veon Bell held out. You didn't know if he was going to come back. You get James Conner, not knowing what he's going to be, other than if he's playing, he's must start. He's a league winner. That's what Jordan Mason is right now, and potentially a guy that you can be able to start for 17 weeks this year.
And let me shout out Big Chuck, because he drafted CMC in the first round, dropped, I believe, 60% of his fab on Jordan Mason. Completely saved his season. And think about it in hindsight, Joel, if you drafted Jordan Mason in the first round, are you upset? You can't, I don't know if you, right?
You could have drafted Bijan. How would that look right now? There's so many guys in that first round. You could have drafted Patrick Mahomes in 2 quarterback leagues. That's not working out. Yeah, Jordan Mason, the CMC thing hurts, but you have Jordan Mason. You got to just be like, this is my first round pick. This is my 3rd overall pick, 2nd overall pick, wherever you got CMC.
It's a great way to think about it, because nobody knew the severity of CMC's injury to this extent. No way, no how. So if you were able to go and get Jordan Mason as your handcuff, you're probably over the moon right now. But let's move into our running back duds. Travis Etienne, it seems as if we're talking about him every single week here, but RB35, 11 carries, 50 yards, which not terrible for his standards, 4.5 a carry, but the limited amount of touches, considering the fact that the last 3 drives of the game, the Jaguars were winning, but 1 catch, 10 yards, 7 fantasy points. When are we going to be talking about Travis Etienne as one of these upper echelon backs again? Because I saw Tank Bigsby down the stretch of this game have a huge 50-yard rush, them not even put points on the board. But I'm seeing Tank Bigsby be efficient with his opportunities. Travis Etienne doesn't seem to be making the most of it. And also we could look at it as a coaching thing. Doug Peterson also has been pretty bad with play calling. It's been a whole terrible situation for Jacksonville right now. So Travis Etienne's another situation where you kind of are forced to put him out there. But if you're one of those guys that have Travis Etienne and you're trying to move him, I'm with you. Get rid of him. I would even trade on a low Travis Etienne for Devon Achane. I really don't care that much about Travis Etienne on my team, regardless of how Devon Achane has looked these last couple of weeks. That's really how low I am on Devon Achane, but mostly the situation in Jacksonville. And the last name, my guy, Ramondre Stevenson, RB31, back-to-back weeks here where we have to talk about him. 13 carries, 43 yards, another lost fumble, 4 catches, 5 targets for 19 yards. Not an ideal situation in a matchup versus San Francisco where they have not been a great rush defense. These last couple of matchups versus the Jets, versus San Francisco, I was optimistic about what he could produce because we had seen him the first 2 weeks be dominant as a rusher. Not so much these last couple of weeks. And honestly, I'm starting to worry because of how poor this offensive line is and how sustainable it was for Ramondre Stevenson to be this yards after contact merchant every single week. Of course, that's a very impressive stat for him, but super unrealistic for him to sustain.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, the fumbling issue is becoming like super real. We're talking about going back to last season, 5 straight games that he's fumbled in. He's fumbled in every single game this season, and then the final game he played in before his injury last year, he fumbled in. Thankfully, Bill Belichick's not the coach because I don't know if he would be going out there to play again next week. It probably would have been Antonio Gibson starting off. But yeah, really tough week for Ramondre. He definitely feels like a guy that is going to be matchup dependent, right? The Jets game, I mean, we thought the rush defense, I think the rush defense is still not that great, but that was a matchup we thought we could exploit. Wasn't great. San Francisco matchup, another one, not fantastic. But the 2 running back duds I want to shout out, one was Josh Jacobs, who we just talked about a little bit ago, thanks to the super chat. Hasn't finished in the top 20 in any week so far in terms of the running backs. Manuel Wilson, as I mentioned, is getting more and more involved, 40% of offensive snaps back-to-back weeks. But I still think there's better days ahead. I think he is still the clear number 1 running back on this team. They go out and pay him like the number 1 running back. He's averaging nearly 6 yards per carry. The upcoming schedule, Rams, Cardinals, Texans, Jaguars. I'm not freaking out yet. This is a guy that I think now maybe he's first or maybe it's still Najee. Two of the guys that are having 50, 60 plus attempts and still have not found the end zone. With Jordan Love back in the fold, I think some things even out. These last couple of weeks, I mean, you've had Malik Willis, right? So it's just been a weird game script. And then this past week, you were down 21, 24-0 in a blink of an eye, and you only got 9 rushing attempts. So I think as these game scripts kind of even out and we get Jordan Love back just on the field for, more than one game, we'll see Josh Jacobs be in that top 15 range. The other running back, Bijan Robinson. We're going to talk about a lot of like studs, or at least one other stud in the wide receiver room about what we do with these guys. He's got one of the safest floors in fantasy football right now. He only got 7 carries last week or, yesterday, less than 65% of snaps, still finished as RB26 in PPR leagues. You don't draft Bijan Robinson to be RB26, but he's shown that he's not going to kill you because in the passing game, he's going to be heavily involved. He got 30 or 40 yards, but he hasn't given you any upside this year. 0 weeks in the top 10, 1 week in the top 15, only 1 touchdown this season. And this wasn't an Arthur Smith thing. Tyler Algier is still involved, and rightfully so. He's averaging over 6 yards per carry. Every time he gets the ball, he's a very physical runner. He's very north and south. He's getting your grill. He's trying to run people over. I think that coaching staff really likes it, and he's going to continue to be involved. Tyler Algier is not going anywhere, right? He's going to be involved in this offense because number 1, he's a good running back. Number 2, I think they do need him for this team because the passing offense could still be a bit sketchy with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Darnell Mooney kind of as your core rushing attack. With that being said, I would definitely entertain the idea of moving off Bijan Robinson. I'm not saying to move off Bijan Robinson to go and get nothing, but if you could move off Bijan and improve at another position, right? If you could take Bijan and a flex wide receiver like Zay Flowers and Amari Cooper or George Pickens and get a great running back in return who's not as great value, or as great of a perceived type running back. James Cook, for example, is a guy that's outperforming Bijan Robinson right now. But Bijan has the name value because he was drafted in the top 5. Can you take Bijan and Zay Flowers, get James Cook and DK Metcalf? Can you take Bijan Robinson and Amari Cooper or George Pickens, get Kyron Williams and a guy like Chris Olave, who the offenses we're not so sure about? So there's definitely name value in these guys. And right now we have 4 weeks of Bijan Robinson. We have 4 weeks of this offense. He's going to have weeks he finishes in the top 5. He's going to have weeks that he finishes as number one running back overall. But through 4 weeks of the season, if you're sitting there at 1-3, don't be scared to field offers just because you took him in the first round.
Yeah, thank you for talking to me directly. I lost a heartbreaker today. Geno Smith had him going. I had the Titans defense. I was down 28 coming into the matchup. He had Jamison Williams. It was looking good. I was down 3 points. Jamison Williams catches the 70-yard bomb. There goes the dream. It was pretty heartbreaking. But I only end up losing by 10 points because Geno Smith was all world. But if Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, and of course, like you mentioned, Bijan Robinson would have played a little bit better, I wouldn't have needed a superstar performance out of Geno Smith. So thank you. I'm definitely going to listen to this. And if you are in my fantasy league and you're listening to this now, yes, I'm going to fleece you and trade you Bijan Robinson. Now, those words usually don't go together very well. However, I'm going to try my best to get a very fair package for trading Bijan Robinson. Moving on to the wide receiver studs. Jaden Reed, with Jordan Love, fire him up. Wide receiver 1, 7 catches, 8 targets, 139 yards, 3 plays of over 20-plus yards, had a touchdown, 27.1 fantasy points. Wide receiver 2, stud. Every single week. Don't think twice about it. Put him in your lineup. If he's your only great wide receiver, congratulations. You still have one of the best wide receivers in fantasy football. Brian Thomas, breaking out right before our eyes. 6 catches, 9 targets. Got out-targeted by Christian Kirk also. Christian Kirk, if I'm not mistaken, had 13 targets, but 86 yards and a touchdown. He is a mismatch every single matchup that he has. It does not matter. He's getting open. He's an explosive play waiting to happen every single time he steps onto the field. A top 10 wide receiver this week. And I'm anticipating him and Trevor Lawrence to only build a stronger rapport as the season goes on. And Deontay Johnson, I'm looking like a genius, Mr. Dehls. Bryce Young, I saw the vision. Bryce Young was the one not executing. Andy Dalton goes out there, and now Deontay Johnson's one of the best fantasy options at the wide receiver position. And there was another chance for him to go ahead and have an even better game than he had already. 83 yards, 7 catches, 13 targets. Had a huge play that was dropped by him. Had a play in the end zone that just goes off his hands. And still had a touchdown, 2 catches of over 20-plus yards, and was a top 10 player at the wide receiver position. Rest of the season moving forward, Deontay, if Andy Dalton's in the lineup, Deontay Johnson's a must-start moving forward, no doubt about it.
Absolutely. 3 wide receivers I want to mention. Number 1, a guy we were super high on, but probably not high enough, Nico Collins. Nico has entered the rest of season. Would you rather have Nico Collins or Tyreek Hill?
Nico.
Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins or Jamar Chase?
Nico
Collins or Justin Jefferson?
Okay, now you're throwing the heavy hitter at me. You threw 2 heavy hitters at me, and I was ready for. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for 2 of the top 3. I would still take Jamar over him with respect to Nico. Fantasy football, though, damn. Is Nico the best option in fantasy football moving forward? I feel like Jet maybe. Maybe Jet, because obviously he has the big playability and he still has the target share. But Nico is Mr. Target Share and he's Mr. Big Play. If I'm not mistaken, he has double-digit 15-plus yard plays. There's nobody else that has double digits. He's insane this season.
So just to round out the top 5 guys that were drafted, Amon-Ra, CeeDee Lamb, where does Nico over both of those guys, or would you still take these guys over him?
I would take Nico over Amon. I would take Nico maybe over Jet. I think Jamar's a big play every single week. That's my thing. He has the ability to have the 40, 50-yard touchdowns. He's shown that since his rookie season. If he's healthy, that's what he can do. I think the only 2 wide receivers I'm taking over him right now, I'm taking Jamar and I'm taking CD. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Tyreek versus Tua stuff. It's there was a report from Schefter that possibly week 8 is what he's returning after he gets off the IR. But yeah, I mean, Nico has entered himself in those conversations. 2 of the other guys that have broken out this past week, Dontavian Wicks. Christian Watson got banged up. If Christian Watson is out, Dontavian Wicks is the next guy to step up. 81% of route participation, 13 targets led the team, 200 air yards led the team. Finished as the wide receiver 3 overall on the week. Next month, the season, Rams, Cardinals, Texans, Jaguars. These are defenses you can exploit. Don't know how long Watson's going to be out for, but as long as he is out, Wicks is one of the best flex plays. He goes in that Jamison Williams, Rashid Shaheed type tier for me. And the last thing I want to mention, Xavier Legette. Similar sense to Tavian Wicks, because we have Adam Thielen out, like we have Christian Watson out. And in Legette's first time really playing in a full-time role, tied Deontay Johnson in terms of routes run, played 61 of 70 offensive snaps, 10 targets, 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. I think more than anything, he just looked good on the field, right? I think there was some questions about where he was drafted, first round pick, not really expected to go that high, but he looked pretty damn good to me this past Sunday. Still a risky play because you don't know week to week what you're going to get out of a guy that's a rookie wide receiver. And even still, this offense looks great. But Andy Dalton, the Panthers, it still feels like you're playing with fire a little bit there. But going forward, I mean, I think he's probably in flex consideration if you are desperate. We got some buys coming up, some injuries coming up. So a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type of, ceiling for him.
So let's read some super chats and then we'll get on to the wide receiver duds. Isaiah Potts, I traded Bijan for CD. W.
Amazing.
W. Jeremy Early, he says, we're back, baby. Flog Nation, Lamar top 2. I don't care. They are back. Yeah, they are back. And Lamar Jackson looked a lot better than Josh Allen. Let's move on to our wide receiver duds. We can make this real quick. Amari Cooper, wide receiver 51. But this is one that I mentioned because he did have 8 targets, 4 catches, 35 yards, 7.5 fantasy points, but had an 80-yard touchdown called back on honestly a phantom holding call. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
This would have been a much different performance, and we would have been talking about him as a stud. Unfortunate for him, but this is where he lands. But Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver 53. This was a wide receiver going with the first 20 wide receivers off the board, maybe even first 15 wide receivers off the board. He goes 2 catches, 5 targets, 48 yards, with a majority of those yards being off the 138-yard catch that he had, 6.8 points. No week this season has he had double-digit fantasy points in a full PPR league. How is this humanly possible? I get it. You haven't practiced all off season. You were trying to get your bag. You're not in shape yet. You got to figure it out because you've had back-to-back solid performance. Let me not say this one because Christian Gonzalez still is one of the best corners in football right now. But versus the Rams, the fact that you went out there and you didn't have one of the best performances of your season, that's really concerning to me. You've had multiple opportunities where you've had drop passes in the end zone too. You need to step up. And as a guy who I have stock in Brandon Ayuk, of course, but just for the grand scheme of things, you need to play better if you want to reach your end goal. And for fantasy options, I still have to trust Brandon Ayuk. You really kind of have no choice. But it's not an ideal situation where we stand right now with Brandon Ayuk.
2 guys I want to highlight, I guess 3 guys. The secondary receivers for the Bears, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen. I don't know what to do with them right now. We had the Rome Odunze breakout last week. Looked like he's due for a big week going up against the Rams, puts up a dud. Keenan Allen coming off injury. Maybe he gets some grace there. But again, similar when I was talking about Caleb Williams, this offense right now is just going to have some really low lows at time, even going up against a Rams defense that was honestly terrible going into this matchup. The other receiver, though, that I want to mention, and it pains me to do it because he was my set of the week, Garrett Wilson. Do you know, can you guess, since 2023, how many top 10 finishes, 2023, started last season, how many top 10 finishes Garrett Wilson has?
0.
Got 1. He got 1 of them with Zach. No Aaron Rodgers so far. But, I mean, it's tough with Garrett because even this season, we were drafting him more or less based on potential. We knew he was a really, really good NFL wide receiver, but we were banking on him and Aaron Rodgers to have this connection, to have what we saw with Rodgers and Devontae Adams for so many years in Green Bay, and we're not really seeing that. He's not being utilized down the field. 8.9 ADOT is 61st in the NFL, 3 targets of 20-plus yards, and the connection with Rodgers just isn't there. And what I've been seeing, because unfortunately I have to watch every Jet snap, everything with Aaron Rodgers is mental. Everything comes with audibles. It comes with hand signals. It comes with checking at the line. That's very difficult to pick up during the season. That's something you want to have in training camp entering the season. When you're installing game plans and you're looking over, defensive coverages, what is this defense running? What are they showing here? What are they blitzing, showing coverage? All of this stuff you're doing week to week to game plan for the upcoming week. It's difficult to do that and then try to get on the same page with your wide receiver right now. Right now, Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, they're not on the same page. And these next few weeks for the Jets, got Minnesota, got Buffalo, got the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is a 3 weeks of some really, really difficult defenses going up. You're going to be going up against. So it's hard to make a case to buy low on Garrett Wilson because I don't think you're going to trade for Garrett Wilson. And one of these next 3 weeks is the week he goes off for 120 yards and a touchdown. These are some really difficult matchups with some really solid cornerbacks. It's almost like Bijan in a sense where his name value, I think, still holds some weight. Now, he does play for the Jets, so that probably brings it down just a bit. But if you could get Chris Godwin for Garrett Wilson, I would rather have Chris Godwin. If you could get DK Metcalf, rather have DK Metcalf. If you could get Chris Olave, would rather have Chris Olave. As Drew's showing me the fucking stupid ass Broncos hat. But right now, Garrett Wilson is he's just a name at this point. He's what can he be for fantasy football? What can he be for real life? And until him and Rodgers show that they're on the same page, he's someone that's like a wide receiver 3. Because right now we're just banking on, he'll figure it out because he's so talented.
I'll tell you what, man, that has to hurt to say. As a guy who I was very high on Garrett Wilson coming in also. I'm not going to say you were alone in this. You and I were both here for the ride. We believed in him. It's been a gauntlet for him to start the season, and him and Rodgers need to figure it out. It's that simple. There's no more, playing it easy with him or
a month into the season.
Come on, you have to figure it out. You are way too great for this to be your outcome. And that also goes for Breece Hall, who I'm surprised that we didn't talk about Breece Hall, or maybe you didn't, and maybe I just missed it. 10 carries.
He's been okay for fantasy. Like he has. Like this week he wasn't great, but like those first 3 weeks, he's been like good enough to not be like, it's been terrible. It just hasn't been what you were expecting.
Now, moving on to our tight end stud. Only guy I want to shout out real quick is Tucker Kraft. His last 9 games with Jordan Love, he's had a total of 34 receptions, 374 yards, 3 touchdowns. I want to give a shout out to Frank Amarante, F.A. Amarante, TFJ. That's his Twitter handle. Want to give him his shout out for this one. He has had 3 touchdowns in that span. It's averaging around 8 fantasy points per game. That would be the tight end 5 for 2024, where we stand right now. And we saw, of course, him got into the end zone this past week with Jordan Love. I believe he also had the 2-point conversion, if I'm not mistaken. So I look at what that can be with the opportunity, especially with potentially Christian Watson missing some time or with the knee injury. It's looking like at least he's going to miss this week. But Tucker Kraft did lose a fumble, but to me, I don't think that matters too much when you have 9 targets, 6 receptions. So I really like Tucker Kraft, and that's something that I'm monitoring because this is going to be such a prolific pass offense.
Absolutely. Love the Tucker Kraft call. I'll do my stud and my dud real quick. Travis Kelce, shout out to the star of the week from you. 7 catches, 89 yards. Rashee Rice, we don't still know what's going on. It's probably not good. Maybe it's not a torn ACL, whatever it is.
We'll take it.
Yeah, the fact that it's not said right away is positive, but either way, I mean, Rashee Rice is going to miss an extended period of time, most likely. So they're going to need Kelce more than ever. We have one top 5 tight end showing that he's got some life. Another one, my dud of the week, Mark Andrews. I mean, he's droppable. Like, this is back-to-back weeks, 0 points. This is not a guy you could start. It feels gross dropping Mark Andrews because this is a guy that in one quarterback leagues, we're talking about around 5 draft pick, around 4 draft pick. It's so difficult to just cut ties with that guy. But right now, you're going to drop him. Someone else in your league is going to pick him up. You're going to be like, damn, like he's going to go off. And he probably won't. Like maybe he'll have 1 or 2 weeks over these next 10 to 13 games where he goes crazy. But we've seen for a month now, he is not involved in this passing offense. Hell, sometimes he's not even getting on the field. Neither is Isaiah Likely. How they keep how they've won 2 games against the Cowboys and the Bills, nonetheless, is super impressive and shows how dominant this running game has been more than anything. But Mark Andrews is looking like one of the biggest whiffs this season.
My dud, Kyle Pitts. 3 targets, 0 catches, 0 yards, tight end 58. Droppable?
Yeah.
Wow, man. How the mighty have fallen.
Kyle Pitts, you know what I mean? Like,
shout out to my guy, Michael. Respect my cause on Twitter. Give him a follow. He's one of the GOAT Bronco Twitter guys that there are. He put out an idea of trading Baron Browning for Kyle Pitts. I get that we're desperate. And, of course, Josh Reynolds may be our best option. Desperate. I don't know if I'm that desperate, truthfully. I get our tight end sucked. Kyle Pitts is an idea at this point, and it's heartbreaking to say, but he's an idea. If Kirk Cousins can't find a relationship with you, I fear that it's not Kirk Cousins, it's you. So that's something that I'm looking at, and really, it's really unfortunate to me because, of course, the potential was always there. But right now, reality and results have said Kyle Pitts is not a good fantasy tight end, and he may not be a good tight end in regular NFL as well.
Yeah, someone put out a tweet of just all of his targets. I mean, he had 3 targets this last game, but just watching him run routes, he looks like he doesn't look good. Like he looks like he's very hesitant on his routes. He's not breaking hard. He's not coming back to the ball. It's all things like this athletic, versatile, mismatched tight end that we saw his rookie season we have not seen at all, right? I mean, of course, he's had these injuries that have injured him and set him back this past couple seasons. But right now, he doesn't look like a great player. I would rather have Isaiah Likely on my team than Kyle Pitts. And I don't know, like, even if you want to go and trade for Kyle Pitts, not for fantasy but for real life, what are you getting for Kyle Pitts? Like a 4th round pick? Like just at a possibility of 4th round pick? Like, do you get really lucky? You could do like Kyle Pitts in a 5th and you get a 3rd for like the Jahan Dotson type style of trade, which has been a disaster for Philly so far. They got fleeced. So right now, I mean, his value's in the gutter. Don't think the Broncos should trade for him. Definitely don't give up Baron Browning. Like if you want a 6th round pick, maybe something happens, sure. But right now he looks kind of lost.
All right, and listen, that's going to do it from us over here at the Fantasy Reaction Show. We appreciate you guys that stayed for the ride. If you guys still are here, leave a like on the video. It really helps us a lot. But of course, we do appreciate you guys tuning in. If you aren't already subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you know we go live like nights like tonight. Tune into the Weekly Blitz. Riv Academy is now back and in full function. I'm happy for my guy over there. But of course, we go live every Thursday night, every Monday night. We'll be back, of course, Thursday to give you our starts and sits of Week 5. But that's going to do it from us over here, and we'll see you guys